So now we need to understand what vendors are in play for software applications and what role those provide in the network. If I'm in a line of business application, let's say it's Salesforce, who's my end user community for Salesforce? Do we have defined procedures set up for how we do things in Salesforce, like create new user account? What permissions are they assigned? We talked about that earlier. So we're going to, inside the onboarding process, and let's talk about that for a minute, because that's where we're going to define it. The way we approach onboarding and offboarding. Obviously, offboarding is just as important or more important than onboarding, although an employee can't start their job until the onboarding process is finished. So we employ a set of secure web-based forms to create an onboarding process for all of our customers. And so what it looks like is we sit down with the HR people, we sit down with whoever the hiring managers are, and we say, okay, do you have a documented process? And if they don't, we define it for them, interview style, right? So what this looks like is we create a form, much like you would imagine. First name, last name, reports to, hire date, employee type. This could be W-2, 1099, contractor, temp. Role. So what role do they provide in the organization? These are going to be drop-down lists, right? Pre-populated with the various roles in the organization.
Right.
So let's just pick on sales for a minute, because that's the easiest. So let's say that we have a new user, John Doe. He's the most commonly employed individual in the United States. So John Doe starts, and his role is sales. So we're going to put this through a workflow after the user hits submit, right? We're going to gather a lot of other information here, like DL group membership. So we'll say, is he part of, sales outside versus sales inside, right? So we're going to gather all that information as part of this big, long transcript when this is done. So after the hiring manager submits this, it's going to go through a workflow. Whoever approves the job requisition, the HR manager, what have you, initiates their portion to say, I approve. This goes into our ticketing system, and then it starts our process for how we create new end users. Depending on this role, we've got a set of procedures we've got to follow. Let's say that I'm provisioning this user in Salesforce.com. I've got lots of things I got to do here. My step 1 is create the account. My step 2 might be assign manager. My step 3 might be assign default sales permission. Right? My step 4 might be, restrict access hours. The point is, we have to define processes by which we go execute tasks on the client's behalf. And so this is the Salesforce.com user account creation process, right? So when you break down everything that your IT department does on a day-to-day basis, this is what the outcome is. We have to document and create process and procedure for everything that's done in that IT department so that we standardize it, done the same way every single time, so that the outcome is consistent. There's some automation that can be introduced in most cases, but there's usually some subset of these that you have to go manually change attribute for a user account for.
Employee leaves, or let's say there's somebody who's on a contract 1099 basis.
Right.
I can imagine somebody that's not employed any longer represents security risk for the business. And by tightening this up, one, you're creating a better experience for somebody that's a new hire. But secondly, you're mitigating risk for being able to take quicker action.
Absolutely. And it just, from an employee perspective, it's a process that is almost always overlooked. But from a professionalism perspective, it makes you so much better as an organization just to have this process defined. We have gone through this evolution ourselves at Netrio, right? And you've seen the difference. Now, when somebody comes in as a new hire here, they've got a welcome kit on their desk. They've got, all their HR information, their benefits explanation, everything is all nice, neat package on their desk, along with, this information from IT. This is what you need to start your day. And so when they hit the ground running on day one, they have everything that they need. They're not spending the next week going and tracking down the IT guy going, oh yeah, hey, I need access to that too. Oh, hey, I forgot about this. I'm going to need that too. Because that's what happens in most cases if you don't have a formal process for doing it up front.
If you're somebody who's been hired, you've gone through a life-changing decision, and you go to work and you don't have your tools you need, you're not able to get there before get trained, you've got a negative view on your new employer right out of the gate, and this helps solve that.
Yeah, it's definitely a soft benefit because they see right off the bat that this company has their processes together. This is a refined procedure, and what you do is you work through it. Even if we can't pin down our HR department and everybody necessary in order to get this, 100% thorough, we always at least, put the basics in there because we can go refine it later, right? But This makes a huge improvement on day one starting experience for any new employee. What we end up with at the end of the day is a library of documents that are process and procedure, right? Some of these are subs and then some of them are, masters, but we end up with a document library that's dedicated to each client that is focused around their processes and procedures. And those are organic, right? I mean, they don't change on a daily basis, but they might on a weekly basis. As the organization adapts, they have the ability to update those documents real time so that we know how to execute them appropriately.
How long does it take to get through this process? And what should an IT organization and a partner be prepared, or channel partner, be prepared to do to help to get to that interval?
I always say this is a 4 to 6 week process. And the reason that I allow so much gap in it is because it really depends on the organization's readiness to accept support like this. Right. And readiness is determined a lot by how much of this process and procedure exists, how much of this documentation around assets is complete, how organized the organization is in terms of having documentation in place and things like who does carry my warranty on my hardware? What are my software subscriptions in terms of maintenance for my SaaS providers? What is my data center contract relationship like? All those things that's all information we have to gather, and it can be time consuming. But it also, I think a good point to make here is the organization has to be prepared to go through this process as well. We can't do it without them, right? So they've got input at every step or most of the steps that are in this process. So they've got to be highly involved in it. So what I'd say here, this represents probably 4 weeks of a 4 to 6 week process.
We haven't even talked about going live yet. And we welcome comments, feedback, future questions. If you got a topic you'd love to hear Brian talk about, whiteboard, let us know.